Hey guys, welcome to this video on Git, and today we'll be looking at everything we need to know as a beginner to get you started with Git and GitHub. So we'll be defining Git, we'll be looking at how to install Git on our system. We'll talk about how to clone a repository from GitHub. We'll talk about how to push our work to Git. Have you ever had the problem password authentication issue? We'll talk about to fix that with your personal access token. So you want to stick around, we'll talk about how to add files, readme file, how to remove file, how to commit, to put your commit message, and basically everything you need to know to get started as a beginner using Git and GitHub. Welcome once again. My name is Daniel Bright from Bwave ICT. So let's get started. First question is, what is Git? Git is the most popular version control code. So essentially what Git is a version, and about 90% or more of software developers in the world uses Git as their version. But what is a version control system? Version control system record the change we make to our code over time, special database called repository. So with a version control system, we can have access to all our project and the history of this project. We can see who made changes, when they made changes, and why they made. And then if you make a mistake with a version control system, you can easily revert our project back to an. Now, without a version control system, we would constantly store copies of our entire project in various folders. And every time we make changes, we have to store it in a new folder. And so that's why a version control system is very important. And Git is a version control system. So with Git, we can basically record our project and we can store our project away from our computers to a database called repository. And then we can always make changes and even allow others to make changes on our projects. This is why it's very, very important that we know Git. So for every software engineer out there, knowing Git is a must. This tutorial will walk us through as beginners how to use the command line, how to use GitHub, how to basically transfer our code locally from our computers to our repositories. So now that we've known the definition of Git, let's talk about how we use Git. Basically, there are three ways we use Git. And the first one is the command line. Now, the command line are things like our command prompt on Windows or our terminal. And so this is the fastest way to use Git. We can also use Git using what we call IDEs, like VS Code and some other IDEs can help us to access Git. And then we also have the graphical user interface, which can also help us to access Git UI. But the way we'll be focusing on today on how to use Git is the command line. And so throughout this tutorial, we'll see various commands and how we can use our terminal to work with Git and GitHub. And so let's get started. The very first thing we want to do is to make sure that we have Git on our system. So how do we do this? Let's open any terminal. So open any terminal in your system and let's check if we have Git in our system. Well, if we don't, we are going to download and install it. How do you check if you have Git on your system and what version of Git you're using? Let's do this now. So I'm going to open my terminal here, command prompts. If you're using Windows by default, you have command prompts. Even without you installing it, it comes by default with your computer. So if you look at my search bar here, you can see command prompts. If you don't have it, you can just type command prompt or CMD. And the command prompt will open. Now to check our Git version, all we have to do, type this command, git, then hyphen version. Once I press enter, you can see that it returns the Git version I have here. It says Git version 2.37. And so I already have Git in this system. However, if you do not have Git, you are going to see an error saying Git is not a recognized command. And if you see that error, it means you have to download and install Git. So let's go ahead and talk us through the process of downloading and installing. To be able to download and install Git, we are going to use our browser, if you're on Windows, to install Git. So just come to your search bar and type Git download for Windows. Among the search results, we are going to see this website, gitscm.com. Here it says download Git. That's all we have to click to be able to download. Now you should see this web page. The website once again is gitscm.com, or you could just search Git download for Windows. All you have to do at this point is to click on this button that says download for Windows. And it will bring you to another page that says click here to download the latest Git version for Windows. And you have to click it. Just like that, you can see down here, we've already started downloading Git. So because I already have Git on my system, I'm going to pause the download. And so after Git has finished downloading, we are going to install Git. All you have to do to install Git is to open the Git folder, the Git app that has been downloaded to your computer, and basically click all the next buttons. Any button, any menu it asks you to select, just select it and click next throughout. So by simply clicking next, you'll be able to install Git. Once you install Git in your system, you are going to have what we call a Git terminal. Now, it's called Git bash, and it's a terminal for Git. Git bash simply means Git born again shell. Now, what this bash does is that it emulates the Linux environment. So it tries as much as possible to have Unix features inside of it. So things like VI and some of the Linux command you're familiar with will work in Git bash. Now, Git bash makes it very easy for us to interact with Git using the command line. So I would suggest you use Git bash. After downloading Git and having Git bash, you could decide to check again the version of Git you have. And it shouldn't return the error. So after downloading it, you can decide to do this. And you would see your version of Git that you have on your computers here. That's all about it for the downloading and installation of Git. Next up, let's talk about configuration settings. So basically, there are two configuration settings we need in Git. The first one is our username and the second is our user email. So what is our username and our user email? Well, to be able to get these things, it's high time we move over to GitHub. Now, let's go to GitHub so that we would have a Git username and we can also open or add our email address to GitHub. GitHub is the website, is the remote server where we upload our codes, and Git is what basically help us to do that. So although we can configure it without having to go to GitHub first, it's better we go there and create an account with GitHub, then come back and configure our Git settings. So let's do that right now. I'm going to go to my browser at this time, and all you have to do is to simply type github.com. You should see a page that looks exactly like this. Now, if this is your first time on GitHub, you can click here to sign up for GitHub, or also click here. But if you already have an account, you just want to sign in. So let's assume we don't have an account and want to sign up. The first thing we'll have to do is to enter our email address. And then we are going to continue. After imputing a valid email address, you can see here it says continue. We'll have to create a secure password and click continue. By just following these steps, you would be able to create a GitHub account. Now, assuming I already have a GitHub account, all we have to do is to sign in. So I'll click on the sign in and input my username or email address and then password. And basically, that's all I need to sign in. Once you sign in, you should see a page like this. This is your GitHub dashboard. And from here, you can now create various things. So basically, we've added a username and then a user email while creating a GitHub account. This username and user email are going to come in very handy. And so let's go back now to our terminal where we were basically configuring our Git. And so we are going to use that username and user email we got from GitHub to configure our Git. All we have to do is on the command line here, we'll type git config hyphen global user dot name, and then double quotes and whatever our name is, whatever our username is, that's what we'll add in between the double quotes. We hit enter after we must have done this step, and our username is configured. So we've added it to Git settings. Next up, we want to get our user email, and still the same process, git config global user email. So just go on to put your email address, the same one on GitHub. And press enter. So basically, we've added our username and our user email with these two simple steps. Now to check our configuration settings, we can use another git command called git config --global e. If I execute this command, it would open our default text editor on Git Bash, which is VI, and it would show us our configuration settings. Now, if you don't know the default text editor that comes with the Unix operating system, which is VI, or you're having difficulties with how to access VI, maybe how to close VI, some basic commands in VI, you could check the description below and a link to my video on VI for beginners will be there. So you can always check it out to get a good understanding of VI as a beginner. I'm going to press enter and I can see now my configuration settings are here. You can see my email and then my username. After this, I would quit VI and basically there are some other configuration settings we can do, but these two, user email and username, are very, very important and we've done them. Now to see a list of other configuration settings, you can type git config --help. This would give us a list of configuration settings. Now, if you don't want a very long list, but you want only the basic list, all you have to do is git config -h. Now, when you type git config .help, we can see it has opened here. The Git configuration manual page has opened on our browser, and now we can see various configuration instructions, what the various Git configuration command, and basically everything about Git configuration in this page. So you can go on and decide to read it to have an in-depth knowledge of Git configuration as well as how Git works. Back to our terminal now. I'm going to clear what I have. And if you don't understand why I typed PLE arrow and everything disappeared, or you don't understand the basic commands for the Unix operating system or how to script the shell, you could also check my video on shell basic commands and scripting, and you'll be able to understand various basic commands. Now we've done a lot. Basically, we've downloaded and installed Git, we've created a GitHub account, and we've configured Git on our system. Now, let us look at how we can now create our first repository and then push our code to GitHub. Now, there are two ways we can have Git in our repository. The first one is to create a repo on GitHub and then clone it to our terminal and work on that cloned repository. Or we could create the repository on our terminal here and then initialize Git in it, and basically push our code from our terminal to GitHub. I'll be talking about the two ways, but the first way is to clone Git from GitHub, to clone our repository from GitHub. And so let's talk about that. We'll go back to our GitHub page here now, and on your GitHub dashboard, you are going to see a green button basically everywhere on the left hand side, you see new here. Here you can also see create a new repository. And if you come here to your top right hand side, you can see your repositories. So you can use any of these options to create a new repository. Now you can click here to say create a new repository, or click here. So I clicked on the new, and you can see it says create a new repository. The first thing you do to create a new repository is to give it a repository name. So I can say learning Git. Now, this is bad practice to leave space in your repository name. So you want to make sure that there are no space in between repositories. And then learning Git is available. That's all for our repository name. Now you can put a description about your repository. It's purely optional. You can describe what this repo is doing here. These two settings is to choose whether your repository can be seen by anyone and changes can be added to by any person. For the most part of it, you want to leave your repositories as public. But if you don't want others to see the content of your repository, you could make it private. Now you can also add a README file here, or you can skip it. You can add git ignore, or you can skip it. And later we'll talk about README files and git ignore. So for now, let's skip them. I'll come down here and create repository. Basically, this is everything I need to create my repository. So as it stands now, my repository has been created. And so this repository, let us talk about how we can get this repository we've created now from Git here to our terminal. And that will bring us to a topic called Git cloning, a concept. So we would have to clone this our repository here now to our computer. And to be able to do that, we'll need what we call a personal access token. So how do we get a personal access token? That's next big question. We'll also get it from GitHub itself. So let's go and grab our personal access. A personal access token helps us get access to our repositories and authenticate it ourselves. So it's very important that we have personal access token. To get a personal access token, on my top right corner where I can see my profile picture here, I'm going to click on this drop down, and down here you can see settings. I'll click on this and it will take me to this page. I'm going to scroll down, and to my left hand side I can see developer setting. Now here I can see GitHub apps, Go auth apps, and then personal access token. So this is what I need now. I'm going to click on personal access tokens, and I already have some personal access token that are already expired. Now, this is what you can do. If you don't have a personal access token, you will not see this here, but you should see this. generate new token. So this is all I have to click to get a new personal access token. And then you can put a note. What is this token for? So I'm going to say learning it. You can also set the expiration date of the personal access token, and you could set it to no expiration at all, but GitHub do not recommend that you put your personal access token, set it to no expiration. So you could 90 days or 30 days or 60 days, you could basically choose any, and then you have to select or define access for personal access token. Now this is very important. Click this repo because it gives you full control of private repository and access to basically every other thing. You could go ahead to click all you think it's necessary, or you could leave it as only repository. And then come down and click on generate token. So just like this, we've gotten a personal access token. But then we have to make sure we copy our personal access token because we will not be able to see it on this page again. So I'm going to copy this personal access token now and paste it in a secure location. So I could open something like my notepad and paste my personal access token here, a secured location. After pasting my personal access token, I can now leave this page and go back to my repository. So this is my repository learning Git. And now that I've gotten my personal access token, I've basically gotten all I need to clone or to get this repository from GitHub down to my local computer. So I'm going to copy this now by clicking on this sign here, and it's copied. Or I can decide to do this and right click copy. But if you do this, you've simply copied everything in. I would copy this and also paste it on my notepad here. And so this is the link to this GitHub project. If I give anybody this link and he imputes it on his browser, it will take him straight to this GitHub repository. And so let's talk about the command we can use to copy, because basically we've gotten everything we need from GitHub to be able to clone or bring down this repository to our terminal. And so let's talk about the command we need to actually complete this step. The command on our Git here is git clone. So what this command does is that it brings in the repository from GitHub down to our computer. Git clone, and then this is the link. So if I copy this link and paste it on my terminal, I'll be able to clone. But if I do this and I try to push my work at a later time, it's going to ask me for password or authentication. GitHub is going to ask me to provide something that proves that this repository is my own. So how do I provide it now so that it won't ask me to do that later? This is where I need a personal access token. So I'm going to copy this personal access token now and come here and paste it. So I've copied this personal access token, and just after the https I've pasted my personal access here. Run all the way here. After pasting this personal access token, I would have to add the at github.com sign. And then here is my username, write Daniel. And then here is the project repository itself, learning. So this would be all I would need to get to clone this repository successfully. So I'm going to copy everything here now. Rather than typing these things on the terminal, you can just simply type and do all these things on your notepad and copy it and then paste on your terminal. On Git bash here, if I just right click, I can see the option to paste. But on some other terminals, you would have to use the Ctrl V or maybe Ctrl AV to be able to paste in those terminals. Whatever terminal you're using, basically that's how to paste. Either you right click, use your Ctrl V or Ctrl AV, depending on the terminal maybe use. I've pasted this whole personal access token and a link to my Git repository here with the command git clone. So if I press enter here now, you see it says cloning into learning Git and then gives me a warning. You appear to have cloned an empty repository. This means that I have a repository called learning on my computer now. Now, if I list what I have here, among all other things would be the folder learning Git. I have a couple of folders here. So if I want to ensure I have learning Git, I could simply try to cd into learning Git. I simply press LE and then press the tab key. If you press LE and then the tab key and it automatically completes it for you, it shows that really you have the folder learning Git on your computers. And here, after cding into learning Git, you can see I'm now in the folder called learning Git. If I list out what I have here, I do not see any file. But this folder is not empty. For example, let's try to remove this folder and see the message it will give us. So I'm going to remove the directory called learning Git. Press enter and it says failed to remove learning Git because the directory is not empty. But if I cd into learning Git and list out what I have, you can see I don't have anything, not displaying anything. But it says that our directory learning Git is not empty. So what exactly happens? By default, after cloning the directory from GitHub, Git has initialized its own repository. It has added a folder that it does not want us to see, a hidden folder by default. If I list what I have in this directory and include the A command, which helps me to access the hidden folders, and press enter, you can see I have this folder .git. This folder ensures that Git is now in my. I don't have to know what is in this folder .git because this is just Git configuration for my folder. Not really necessary. But all that is necessary is that I've cloned Git, my personal access token, and Git folder is now on my computer. So from here, I can decide to do a couple of things before pushing my work. And the very first thing I want to do is to create a README file. So whenever we are creating repositories on Git, we add a README file because a README file gives description of the project. So a README file basically tells the user or tells a visitor, anyone who decides to check on your work, what your code does. So once you have a README file, it's the first thing someone would see when he goes to your GitHub repository. A README file describes what your project is doing, tells the user why your project is important, and basically, you use a README file to explain your project. But by default, a README file doesn't come. You have to create it. Now, you can use the GitHub website to create your README file, or you can decide to use the command. So let's just say we want to use the command line. I want to create a README file. I'm going to use the echo command. Now, this is not some kind of code. It's just a way to write into a file on shell. If you don't know of this command echo, you want to check out my video on shell basic commands and shell navigation. Two-part video, and you want to check that video that this command better. But for now, I want to write my README file. Maybe this repository helps us learn about Git. That's the function of this repository. So I can say this repo helps us. So what have I done here? Echo, this is the command to write into a file. And I have to use these quotes, and everything inside these quotes would be written in the file. And then this is the name of the file, readme.md. So following exactly this command here, we can create our readme file and then write something into. So I'm going to press enter now. And if you list out what you have on this directory, you're going to see a readme.md file. I can use the cat command to check out basically what I have in the file. When I press enter, you can see the content I wrote here. You can see them in the file. It says this repo helps us learn about Git. So we've cloned our repository from GitHub and we've created the README file here. Remember, we've also configured our Git previously. So at this point, let us now push our work. In other words, let us transfer what we have here on our computers to that remote server called GitHub. How do we do this? We are going to use some commands. The first one would be git add dot. What does this command do? Everything we hit in this git add, after the git add, so if I do git add readme.md, it's going to add this readme.md only to this folder called Git. And when I eventually push my work, only readme.md file would go to Git. Now, if I want to push everything on my computers to Git, I'm just going to use the dots. So this command git add dot will put every single project, every single file we have on our system to git, except the hidden files. Git add and then enter. And next up, we have to give Git a commit message. We have to tell Git what message we are giving to it. This commit that we're about to make, this code that we're about to push to GitHub, we have to explain to Git what this code is. Is it our first commit? Is it our second commit? So since it's the first time I'm doing this, I'll write my first commit because it's the first time I'm transferring content of this repository, my local machine, GitHub. So the command to be able to do that is git commit dash m and then in quotes here, my first commit. I'm going to press enter now. And after that, the next thing I want to do is git push. So this command will finally transfer the work that I've added to and I've committed, to transfer them from my local machine to the remote server called Git. So when I press enter, it tells us something. It says we should push the current branch and set the remote as upstream. So it gives us a command to be able to push our branch, and it tells us that since this is the first time we want to push, we should push our work to the branch main. So I'm going to set upstream origin main. Exactly this command it gives me here, I'm going to impute it down here and then press enter. Once I do that, I can see enumerating object 3 done, counting object 100%, writing object 100%. And basically, what this has done is that I've been able to push the contents of my local repository to GitHub successfully. If you notice, it did not ask me for password or a personal access token. But many people have the problem that when they click on the command git push, it's going to ask them for a password. In that case, all you simply have to do is to come back here, copy only your personal access token again, and paste it. Copy your personal access token, and in the place where it asks you for password, simply paste it once. Now when you paste it, now you can see the personal access token here clearly, but when you paste it on your terminal, you may not see the personal access token. However, it is there. So just paste it once using Ctrl V or Ctrl AV or any other command that works for your terminal to paste. Just do that once and press enter. The reason why it's asking you for password is because you did not clone your repository with your personal access token in the first place, or you made a mistake while imputing your personal access token. And that's why I suggest you just copy it and do everything here in your notepad so you won't make any mistakes. So at this point, we've added our files to Git, we've committed with a message, and then we've pushed our work to GitHub. Let's go to GitHub to check if what we have is there. So this was the page where we had learning Git repo on GitHub. This was our repo before we pushed our code to GitHub. Let's refresh this, see what we have. Now you can see everything has changed and we have a readme.md file that we created in our terminal that says this repo helps us learn about. You can see we have this here now. And so we have a file called readme.md and a GitHub repository called learning. So basically, this is how to create a repository on GitHub, clone it down, and then push back to. Now, inside this repository, we only have one file. We can have various folders inside one repository that does various things. How do we create a folder on Git using Git and push that folder back to GitHub? We'll use the command line to create a folder now and then use Git to would push it back to. So let's see how exactly we are going to do that. So in this folder called learning Git, in this repository called learning Git, we want to have 3 repositories and a readme.md file. So I'm going to come back to my terminal now. Now, if I list out what I have, I see a readme.md file. Now, how do I create a repository? I'm going to use the command mkdir and create this repository. So I can say first folder and hit enter. Now, if I list out what I have a folder called first folder. So that's how to create a folder in our repo. Now I can create another folder, 2 more folders. I'll call this second folder. And I'll just go ahead and create the third folder. So I separate the second and the third folder with a space and it will create 2 folders for me. Hit enter, and then when I list out what I have, you can see I have second folder, third folder, and first folder. Now I want to get into my first folder and create another file, maybe a text file simply saying hello world. How do I do that? I'm going to seed into my first folder. If these commands to cd, to make directory, to remove directory are looking vague to you, you want to check out my tutorial of shell for absolute beginners. I explained clearly there. So I'm in my first folder now, and I can simply create a file called hello.txt. This is a file I'll be using the touch command, hello.txt. And if I list what I have, you can see I have a file called hello.txt. I also want to create a readme file inside this first folder. So I'm going to once again echo, that is to write into my file, like create it if it doesn't already exist. And I would describe this readme, this folder as first folder containing a hello txt file. This is the description of my test folder. I'm creating this readme file inside the folder called test folder, and that folder is in the repository called learning git. I'm going to do this in the file called readme.md. Press enter now. So when we list out what we have, you can see we have two files. The first one is a readme.md file. Second one is a txt file in hello text. And so at this point, I want to push this folder now to GitHub. So right here in the first folder, I'm going to now git add dot, then press enter. But before that, we can see a status. We can see how Git is looking like in our folder. We can basically see everything Git has done or Git has not done on our folders. So we can use the command git status, and it says so far our branch is up to date. Now we can use the git add to include what will be committed. But there are untracked files currently present. Although it tells us that there are nothing to commit, but untracked files are currently present. And one of such untracked files is readme.md and our hello.txt. So we are going to use the git add to choose what we are going to put next. So git add dot. And then we can check our git status again, and we can see that it's telling us that there are changes that we need to commit because we have added them. We've removed them from their status as untracked files, and now they are tracked files. Added them. There are new files here. We can see readme.md and hello.txt. So at this point, we want to commit with a new message. So I could say first commit in this repo. And then press enter. So it tells me two files change, one is session. So these are the files that it has created, and I'm going to commit now. So next thing I want to do to complete this process is to git push. So this would finally send my folder called first folder to it. So git push here, and that's it. It's 100% done, and I've added a folder called first folder. Now I can go back. If you recall, we had three folders: first folder, second folder, and third folder. But everything we did was inside the first folder. And basically where I added things was inside the first folder, where I committed was inside the first folder, where I pushed was inside the first folder. By the time we go to GitHub, check if we would see our second and third folder. So let's go to GitHub now and refresh. You can see we have first folder here and a readme.md file. If I open this first folder, I have my hello.txt text and my readme.md text in the first folder. But I do not have second folder and the third folder. That is because I did everything inside of the first folder and not inside of the learning Git repository. This is just the basics of Git. Now we'll talk more about it. For example, here I can see this place that they wrote main. This is a branch. And so far, I have only one branch called main. Because I use the command git push set upstream origin main, I can have main here. But if you don't use that command when you were trying to push your code to GitHub, you would have a master branch. Advice, you use the command to turn your master to main. This is all the branch I have currently, main. So I do not have master and main, only main branch. So how can we create a new branch? What's the work of a branch? And how can we make sure that our branch do not cause us troubles? We'll talk about all of this in the second part of this tutorial. But for the first part, we've talked about creating a repository on Git, cloning it using our personal access token, how we can push our work to GitHub using the command line, and how we can change our branch from master to main, start having two branches. So those are what we've talked about so far. In the next tutorial, we are going to be talking about branches, how we can create another branch, what is the work of a branch, how we can make sure that we do not have issues with, we do not have conflict files because of our branches. We are going to talk all about that second part of this. So please watch out for the second part. And if this tutorial was helpful, kindly leave a positive comment, like and subscribe to this channel, get updates so that once the second part of this tutorial is out, we will not miss it. If you have any questions, contributions, or suggestions, you could also tell me down below in the comment section. Is there anything you want me to talk about? You also tell me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you in the part 2